Thursday, Anona, family and friends. It's hard to believe. We're finishing up our series on Acts, and today I'm going to be talking about Acts chapter 27. Now, this is the story after Paul has been arrested and held by Roman authorities. Now, because he has appealed that his case should be heard by the emperor, he is being sent to Rome. And so the story starts with Paul's getting on a ship, heading to Rome. Now, nowadays we think of, that would be just a short voyage. Not so in Paul's day. Very much more difficult. This is the story of him having several instances of bad weather, of the ship running aground, of shipwreck, but no lives were lost. So I encourage you to read all of chapter 27 as you get ready for the very last chapter of Acts. Today I want to concentrate on the first 3 verses of chapter 27. There are some names here that are difficult to pronounce, but I'll do my best. So 27:1, when it was decided that we were to sail for Italy, they transferred Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan cohort named Julius. Embarking on a ship Adramyttium that was about to set sail to the ports along the coast of Asia, we put to sea accompanied by Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica. The next day we put in at Sidon, and Julius treated Paul kindly and allowed him to go to his friends to be cared for. We sometimes look at these stories in Acts and we see the big actors in the story. We see the Pauls especially. We see the Peters. We see some of the other disciples. But scattered throughout all of Acts are these lesser known names that are brought up and I think are important for us to think about. For instance, the first thing he mentions in chapter 1 is that it was a centurion of the Augustan cohort named Julius. Now, we're not sure what that meant by the Augustan cohort, but it was probably some kind of special unit of the army that was used to help transport things or prisoners or things back and forth from the provinces back to Rome. So these were probably very long-time professional soldiers who were very well trusted and part of this special unit. And I think it's important that we see here that this centurion named Julius was very kind to Paul. He showed him great respect. In verse 3 here, he allows him to go to his friends to be cared for. Once they landed, he didn't seem to be bound, like we would think of a prisoner and put in solitary confinement or confined to a jail cell. He was allowed to go to his friends to be cared for. Maybe a very insignificant figure in the book of Acts can also teach us that there are no insignificant ways that we treat other people, and that treating people with kindness and respect should be our norm. Back in verse 2, when it says, we put to sea accompanied by Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica. I think Paul had one of those personalities. He was well educated. He could speak very well with all types of people. And I think that because of his influence, Julius treated him with kindness and respect. He probably saw in Paul something along the same lines of himself, the same kind of professionalism that he saw in himself. And how much we can learn from that same type of thing. Do we treat even those that we consider prisoners of ours Do we treat them with kindness and respect? Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica. Well, it's very unusual that he would have been allowed to go with Paul, so it might very well be that he was somehow became indentured to Paul, or he set himself as a slave of Paul so that he would also be taken with Paul on this journey. Now, we first hear of him in Acts 19:29. We also hear about him in 20, chapter 1, of course, here in 27, but he's also mentioned in Paul's letters to the Colossians and to Philemon. So it's not a name we run across very often, but he's first mentioned in Acts. If you'll remember, in one of Paul's journeys, he was going to Ephesus. It is a city that had several gods, but its main god was Artemis. Artemis was considered queen of heaven. She was fertility, virginity, protector of the childbearing. And Ephesus was a popular tourist attraction in the Roman world. And they sold many kind of statues or shrines or things to Artemis. And if you go back to chapter 19, you'll see where Paul is saying that gods made by human hands are no gods at all. We worship now the one true God. He's not made in any image. Of course, this got Paul in deep trouble with the people of Ephesus, especially those who were making these artifacts. And so they got riled up, and when they couldn't get to Paul, they grabbed his companions. And one of those was Gaius and Aristarchus, who's been with Paul on several journeys, who's now with Paul as he's on his way to Rome. We don't know anything much about Aristarchus other than he was a Macedonian from Thessalonica. But yet, here Paul mentions him several times. It's a way of letting us know that this man's faith and this man's support of Paul was very important. So as we go throughout our day, are you an Aristarchus to someone like Paul? Are you an Aristarchus to someone like Peter? We can't all be the Peters and the Pauls, but we can be those people that support, follow, and that give help to those leaders in our lives, those spiritual giants in our lives. How are you someone's support? How are you someone's advocate? And I pray that we can all be like Aristarchus and be there for those of our leaders, those of our pastors, those of our teachers, those of our church leaders who need our help and need our support. Hope you have a great weekend. Have a great 4th of July. You can join us this Sunday online or in person here at Anona. Look forward to seeing you next week.